Something is wrong with this trailer, and I don't think the cast expected us to notice it this fast. For weeks, everyone from Jonathan Roumie to Dallas Jenkins has been dropping hints, saying things like, "This is the hardest thing we've ever filmed," without ever explaining why. Now the Season 6, Episode 1 trailer is finally here, and after watching it frame by frame, I think I understand what they were trying to warn us about. But here's the part that's bothering me the most. There's a moment buried inside this trailer, just a few seconds long, that changes how we should be reading everything that's coming. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to see this trailer completely differently. Every trailer has an opening choice, a decision about what the very first image the audience sees is going to be. And that choice tells you everything about the tone the creators want you to feel before a single word is spoken. For 5 seasons, The Chosen has opened its promotional material with warmth, sunlight, community, teaching, healing, moments that make you feel like you're being welcomed into something good. This trailer throws that entire pattern away. There is no warm welcome this time. The very first seconds are built on darkness and tension, and that decision alone tells experienced viewers that the creative team wanted to signal, immediately and without apology, that this season is not going to feel like the ones before it. What follows is a direct plunge into the aftermath of the arrest in the garden. There's no easing into it. The apostles are shown in a state of complete disorientation, their faces caught somewhere between panic and disbelief, as if their entire understanding of the world just cracked open in front of them. For 3 years, these men have followed one person, built their entire lives around him, walked away from careers and families and comfort to be near him. And now, in a matter of minutes, that entire foundation is being tested in a way none of them were prepared for. The trailer lingers on their faces just long enough to make the discomfort land. It's not a quick cut and move on. It's a deliberate choice to make the viewer sit in that confusion alongside them. Peter's arc gets particular attention here, even in just these opening seconds. There are brief, almost subliminal flashes of his expression, moments where you can see something breaking in him before the actual betrayal has even happened. Longtime viewers know exactly what's coming for Peter in this stretch of the story, and the trailer seems to know that we know. It doesn't need to explain the denial to us. It just needs to plant the seed of dread early, so that every subsequent glimpse of Peter throughout the rest of the trailer feels loaded with an emotional weight we can't shake off. Then the trailer gives us our first proper look at Jesus in custody, and this is where the tone shifts from unsettling to genuinely heavy. Jonathan Roumie's performance, even stripped down to these few fragmented seconds, carries an unusual stillness. There's no resistance in his posture, no arguing, no attempt to plead his case, no visible fear that you'd expect from someone being led toward danger. Instead, there's a quiet, almost unsettling composure, the kind of composure that only makes sense if the person walking forward already understands and accepts what's about to happen to them. That distinction matters enormously for how this story lands emotionally. This isn't being framed as a man overwhelmed by forces beyond his control. It's being framed as someone choosing, deliberately and knowingly, to walk directly into suffering. And once you notice that framing, every other image in the trailer starts to carry a different kind of weight. From there, the trailer moves us through fragments of the early trials, brief glimpses of being brought before religious authority, and the atmosphere in these scenes is tight and claustrophobic. There is a real sense of power being wielded in these rooms, an established order that has already decided the outcome before the process even begins. The trailer captures this without needing lengthy dialogue. A look, a posture, a controlled sense of contempt on the faces of those in power is enough to tell you everything about how this is going to go. And then, almost without warning, we see the first real act of physical violence. It's brief. It's not lingered on excessively, but it happens on screen, in a way the show has largely avoided showing so directly in previous seasons. That single moment functions like a hinge point in the trailer. Before it, everything feels like tension building towards something. After it, you understand that the show is no longer holding back from showing what actually happened. What makes this section especially effective from a storytelling standpoint is how the apostles are used as an emotional mirror throughout. They're shown watching from a distance, hidden in shadows, forced into the position of helpless witnesses. Their reactions are the audience's reactions. Every wince, every held breath, every barely restrained instinct to intervene reflects exactly what we as viewers are feeling, but are equally powerless to change. It's a smart directorial choice, because it means the trailer doesn't have to tell us how to feel. It just shows us people feeling it, and we recognize ourselves in them instantly. By the time this stretch of the trailer moves into the larger trial before the religious council, the tension has already been built so carefully that even brief, fragmented glimpses of witnesses contradicting themselves and accusers growing louder feel charged with dread. And that's really the mini cliffhanger this section leaves us on. We know, historically and narratively, exactly where this story is going. But the way this trailer is choosing to walk us there, slowly, deliberately, and without the comfort the show usually offers, suggests that knowing the outcome isn't going to make it any easier to sit through when the full episode finally arrives. Here's the detail that I think most people are going to scroll right past on their first watch, and it's the one thing in this entire trailer that changes how the whole season should be interpreted going forward. Throughout the trailer, in between the heaviest and most difficult images, there are these brief, almost blink-and-you'll-miss-it flashbacks. Quick cuts to earlier, lighter moments. Jesus laughing with the disciples, teaching by the water, healing someone in a crowd. On a first watch, it's easy to interpret these as simple emotional breathers, quick relief valves inserted, so the trailer doesn't feel unbearably heavy from start to finish. But when you actually pay attention to where these flashes are placed in the edit, a different pattern starts to emerge. Every single one of these flashback moments is placed immediately after or immediately before a moment of suffering or cruelty. It's not random. It's not simply pacing for the sake of pacing. It's a structural choice, and structural choices in trailers are almost never accidental, especially not from a production this deliberate about its storytelling. What this suggests is that the season is being built around a direct visual conversation between what was and what's happening now, forcing the audience to hold both realities in their mind at the same time. You're not allowed to just watch the suffering in isolation. You're constantly being reminded of exactly what is being lost in that suffering, which makes the weight of it hit even harder. This matters for a very specific reason. A show can portray suffering in two very different ways. It can portray it as an isolated, contained event, something terrible that happens and then is simply followed by whatever comes next. Or it can portray it as a direct continuation of everything that came before, a suffering that only makes emotional sense because of the relationships, the joy, and the connection that existed beforehand. Based on how this trailer is edited, It's clear the creative team is choosing the second approach. They want the audience to feel the full cost of what's happening, not in isolation, but specifically because we've spent 5 seasons building an attachment to who this person was and what he meant to the people around him. There's a second layer to this hidden detail that's worth pointing out. Notice how the trailer treats silence differently than it has in previous seasons. In earlier trailers and earlier seasons of the show, silence was often used as a moment of peace, of teaching, of connection between characters. In this trailer, silence is used almost entirely as a weapon. It shows up in the moments right before something painful happens, and it shows up again in the aftermath when characters are too overwhelmed to speak. That's a deliberate inversion of how the show has used quiet moments up until now, and it signals something important about the emotional architecture of this season. The comfort that silence used to represent is being replaced by dread. Peace has been replaced by held breath. There's also a small but meaningful detail in how Mary, the mother of Jesus, is framed in the handful of seconds she appears. Rather than being shown reacting loudly or dramatically, she's shown holding herself together, visibly straining to maintain composure while everything around her falls apart. This is a very specific and very human choice for how to portray grief. It's not theatrical. It's restrained, almost unbearably so. And that restraint is what makes it land as authentically painful rather than performative. If the show continues this approach throughout the season, it suggests we're not being set up for melodrama. We're being set up for something that's trying to portray grief the way it actually feels, quiet, internal, and devastating precisely because it isn't loud. Taken together, these choices point toward a season that is being constructed with an enormous amount of intentionality behind every single edit. Nothing here appears to be there simply to shock. Every difficult image seems to be paired, deliberately, with something that reminds us exactly why it hurts. That's a very different creative philosophy than simply showing suffering for its own sake. And if the finished season follows through on what this trailer is promising, it could end up being one of the most emotionally disciplined pieces of storytelling this production has ever attempted. But it also means we should expect every episode from here forward to be layered with intention. And that's exactly why paying close attention to small structural choices like this one is going to matter more than ever this season. Now let's get into speculation, because there's a lot here worth theorizing about. And I want to be upfront that everything in this section is a prediction based on patterns in the trailer, not confirmed information. With that said, there are a few threads worth pulling on. The first theory involves the decision to release the Crucifixion episode separately in theaters, rather than folding it directly into the streaming rollout of the season. It's possible that this isn't purely a marketing decision. It could be that the creative team views this specific episode as functioning almost like its own standalone film within the larger season, something meant to be experienced with full attention in a shared space, without the option to pause or multitask. If that's the intention, it would explain why the trailer leans so heavily into cinematic techniques, sound design, and visual composition rather than dialogue-driven storytelling. This could mean the Crucifixion episode is being treated less like a typical television installment and more like a theatrical event designed to demand complete emotional presence from the audience. The second theory centers on the release date itself. A theatrical release scheduled outside of the traditional Easter season is an unusual choice for content this specifically tied to the Crucifixion narrative. It's possible that this timing is meant to strip away the routine, expected emotional context that comes with watching this story during a holiday when audiences are already primed for it. If viewers experience this content on an ordinary day, away from the built-in reverence of a religious calendar, it could hit with more raw, unexpected emotional force, precisely because it isn't wrapped in the comfort of tradition. This is only a theory, but the specificity of choosing a non-holiday date suggests there may be intention behind it, beyond simple scheduling logistics. A third theory worth considering involves how Peter's arc is being set up through this trailer. Given how much weight is placed on his expressions, even in these brief opening moments, it's possible that Season 6 is going to spend significantly more time inside Peter's internal experience than previous seasons have. Rather than treating the denial as a single dramatic beat, the show could be building toward a much longer, more psychologically detailed exploration of guilt, identity, and reconciliation. If that's the direction the season takes, it would fit with The Chosen's established pattern of giving deep, humanizing attention to side characters rather than keeping the narrative narrowly focused on Jesus alone. There's also a theory worth raising about Pilate's portrayal. The trailer appears to frame him with a level of moral complexity, showing his hesitation and his desire to avoid responsibility rather than portraying him as a simple villain. It's possible this season is going to lean into a more nuanced exploration of complicity, showing how ordinary weakness and self-preservation, rather than outright malice, can still lead to devastating outcomes. If the show follows through on that approach, it could make the political dimension of this story feel more uncomfortably relevant to modern audiences than a simpler, more black and white portrayal would. Finally, there's a theory about how the flashback structure discussed in the previous section might extend into the actual episode itself, not just the trailer. If the editing pattern we identified continues throughout the full season, it's possible that entire episodes will be structured around this back-and-forth rhythm between past joy and present suffering, rather than a straightforward linear narrative. This would be a bold structural choice for a season finale stretch, but it would also explain why cast members have described this as the hardest emotional work of their careers. Constantly moving between these emotional extremes, scene after scene, take after take, would be exhausting in a way that a single, contained dramatic scene simply isn't. All of this remains speculation until the actual episode's release, but the patterns in this trailer give us enough to reasonably guess at the creative direction the show is heading toward. Based on everything shown and implied in this trailer, here's what we can reasonably expect as Season 6 unfolds, while remembering that all of this remains prediction rather than confirmed fact. The opening episode appears set to move rapidly through the arrest, the early interrogations, and the beginning of the formal trial process, establishing the political and religious machinery that will drive the rest of the season's central conflict. Expect the pacing here to be tighter and more relentless than in previous season openers, with far less time spent on quieter character moments and much more focus on mounting tension. We should also expect Peter's storyline to become one of the most emotionally central threads of the early episodes. Given how much visual weight the trailer places on his internal turmoil before the denial even occurs, it's likely that his guilt and eventual reckoning with that guilt will be given substantial screen time, possibly stretching across multiple episodes rather than being resolved quickly. This could position him as one of the season's most important emotional anchors, giving the audience someone to process the unfolding tragedy through, even as the central focus remains on Jesus' path toward the cross. The trial sequences are likely to expand significantly beyond what's shown in the trailer, given how much narrative ground needs to be covered between the arrest and the eventual crucifixion. Expect fuller scenes with Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin, more extended interactions with Pilate, and likely a more complete version of the Herod sequence, which the trailer only briefly hints at. Each of these segments seems poised to explore different facets of institutional failure and moral compromise, building a larger picture of how systems of power can collectively enable an outcome that many individuals within those systems privately know is wrong. Given the trailer's heavy visual emphasis on Mary and the other women who followed Jesus, it's reasonable to expect their perspectives to receive expanded attention as the season progresses toward the crucifixion. Their grief and the way they're shown trying to remain present despite the horror unfolding in front of them seems set up to become one of the season's most emotionally resonant threads, particularly as the story approaches its most difficult episode. As for the crucifixion episode itself, everything about its theatrical release strategy suggests the production is treating it as the emotional and narrative culmination not just of this season, but arguably of the entire series up to this point. Expect a heavy emphasis on physical and emotional realism, continued use of the joy versus suffering editing pattern we identified earlier, and a deliberate avoidance of anything that could make the moment feel rushed or sanitized. Given the comments from cast and crew about this being their hardest work, it's likely that this episode will be paced more slowly and deliberately than a typical television episode, allowing each stage of the crucifixion narrative room to breathe rather than compressing it into a quick sequence of events. What remains genuinely uncertain, and what makes this stretch of episodes so compelling to anticipate, is exactly how the show will handle the transition out of this darkness. The Chosen has always balanced heavy material with moments of hope and humanity, and how the writers choose to thread that needle here without undercutting the weight of what's being portrayed is going to be one of the defining creative challenges of the entire season. All signs point toward a deeply intentional, carefully structured build toward the most difficult and most important episode the show has ever attempted. And based on this trailer alone, it's clear that nothing about how they get there is going to feel easy. So here we are, staring down the most emotionally demanding season this show has ever attempted, armed with a trailer that gives us just enough to feel the weight of what's coming without letting us fully prepare for it. Every hidden detail, every editing choice, every quiet moment of stillness in this trailer seems to be pointing toward a season built with an incredible amount of intention behind it. But trailers only ever tell part of the story. What do you think is really being set up here? Do you think the theatrical release of the Crucifixion episode is going to change how you experience this story? Drop your theories in the comments. I genuinely want to know what details you caught that I might have missed. And if this breakdown helped you see the trailer differently, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the full episode reaction when Season 6 finally drops.